In real time, the effects of reckless government spending, record inflation, and the hardship that it causes, rising interest rates, supply chain shortages, instability in the banking system, and uncertainty across the board. Now, unlike President Biden, I don't dismiss Americans' fear about higher prices. I share them. And I share their conviction that we must change course before it's too late. That is why I'm here. Today, I speak to you not just as Speaker of the House, but as a father, as a former small business owner, as a taxpayer, as a proud American. I want to talk to you about the debate that is not happening in Washington, but should be happening over our national debt. It's a debate that directly affects the lives of every single American. America deserves to hear the truth. I'm going to start just with the facts. Our national debt is too high, far too high. And the problem is getting worse, not better. We are now $31 trillion in debt. That's more than the entire economy of America, 20% more. Think for a moment. That is unsustainable. Over the next 10 years, the United States will pay $10.5 trillion just in interest on our debt. Put that in perspective. Since 1940 until today, we have paid $9 trillion of interest in our total debt. Over 83 years, $9 trillion. And now we're going to pay 10.5 and 10. If our lifetimes, these interest payments are on track to crowd out and eventually eclipse the vital programs like Social Security and Medicare. And let me repeat, far from protecting these vital programs, as the president says he will, President Biden's extreme spending threatens to crush them with debt and economic decay. Without exaggeration, American debt is a ticking time bomb that will detonate unless we take serious, responsible action. Yet, how has President Biden reacted to this issue? He has done nothing. So in my view, I think in the rest of America, that's irresponsible. Rather than face the facts, this president has embraced a fantasy that debt doesn't matter, that money can always be created out of thin air, and that the solution to higher prices caused by reckless spending is just higher taxes. In 2 short years, President Biden, along with the Democrats in Congress, have added $6 trillion to our national debt burden, which created inflation, made us more dependent on China, and has undermined Medicare and Social Security. Today, it's the American people who are left paying the price. Americans have received a pay cut for 24 consecutive months. The longest streak in American history as inflation has just persisted. In fact, since President Biden took office, families have lost the equivalent of $7,400 worth of income. Nearly 6 in 10 Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to make ends meet. For young families, Biden's inflation means home ownership is moving further and further away. For our seniors, Biden's inflation means a lifetime of retirement savings are being ravaged. And now we see the collapse of the largest bank since the Great Recession. It's a direct result of incompetent bank supervision and the negative effects of constantly fighting President Biden's inflation. It is basic economics that when Washington prints more and more money, prices go up and purchasing power comes down. As my favorite economist, Milton Friedman, said it more than 50 years ago, inflation is made in Washington. Yet rather than working with Republicans to find a reasonable agreement to tame inflation, provide certainty to the economy, President Biden is demanding that Congress make room for new debt without a single sensible change to how government spends your hard-earned money. Not one change. My question to you today, does that sound responsible? Let me put it this way. If you gave your child a credit card and they kept maxing it out to the limit, would you just blindly raise the limit? Of course not. Not one parent would do that. You'd be responsible for paying the bill, but you would sit down. You'd work with them to figure out how they could change their spending habits so it never happens again. That exact same thing is true for our national debt. Right. Make no mistake, the longer President Biden waits to be sensible, to find an agreement, the more likely it becomes that this administration will bumble into the first default in our nation's history. Addressing the debt requires us to come together, find common ground, and reduce spending. Let me be clear, defaulting on our debt is not an option. But neither is a future of higher taxes, higher interest rates, more dependency on China, an economy that doesn't work for working Americans. Let me be clear. A no strings attached debt limit increase will not pass. But since the president continues to hide, House Republicans will take action.
All right, look, one thing is clear from this morning's theater at the New York Stock Exchange. Democrats want to avoid defaulting on our country's debts. Meanwhile, Speaker McCarthy continues to bumble our country towards a catastrophic default, which would cause the economy to crash, cause monumental job loss, and drastically raise costs for the American people. He went all the way to Wall Street and gave us no more details, no more facts, no new information at all. I'll be blunt. If Speaker McCarthy continues in this direction, we are headed to default. The main way we've avoided default in the past is to avoid and reject brinksmanship and hostage-taking, and instead work together in a bipartisan way. Speaker McCarthy insists on cuts. Well, there's a time to discuss what kind of cuts folks are looking for or taxes they want to raise. It's called a budget. It shouldn't be part of this conversation. That kind of discussion, the cuts, belongs in a discussion about the budget, not as a precondition for avoiding default. To date, after countless requests, Speaker McCarthy has yet to produce any concrete plan as to the cuts he would make. One that details the specific cuts he wants and that has the support of 218 Republicans in the House. Democrats have called on Speaker McCarthy over and over and over. Show us your plan. So in sum, to sum it all up, Speaker McCarthy plays a risky and dangerous game when insisting on imposing severe cuts which would hurt the American people, raise our prices, and threaten our economy before we avoid default. In addition, he can't even reveal what those cuts are. If Speaker McCarthy doesn't change his course, he could well take this country to default. ready for your questions. We'll take them first on this subject. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. I mean, at this point, it seems like neither side is relenting. So what is your plan B for a clean debt limit increase?
Plain and simple, as it's been done in the past 3 times under President Trump, under President Biden. Democrats and Republicans came together, bipartisan, and avoided default with no preconditions, no brinksmanship. That's what's going to happen. That's what should happen. That's the best thing to happen.